To give context to this scene, Roxy runs out of mana right here, and she realizes all hope is lost, and literally in her act of desperation, realizing there's just nothing she can do, you could just see the fear right on her face. It's honestly just such impressive character expression through the art, but to also showcase just more of just how desperate she was in the scene. Like, look very closely as she's like just now swinging her, staff around trying to keep them back. They shoot it out of her hands, and she realizes, like, there's nothing she can do. And you literally see, like, her character, like, trembling here. She literally is trembling. And if you look very closely, the animators even add in the fact that she wets herself. Like, she is so frightened, you can literally see that right there. And it's just like, it's crazy. This is the first time in a very long time we have seen Roxy in person with new content, and this is basically the scene we see her with. It shows that she has had a very rough month inside this teleportation labyrinth, and basically Rudy appearing before her eyes at the end here, like, he freezes all these monsters, and, like, she sees him. It's such a very magical moment, because I want to put it in perspective. It has been since episode 2 of Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation. Like, it's been that long. It's been, like, 20, 30 episodes since then. It's actually ridiculous just how long it's been since Rudy has actually seen Roxy, even though, Rudy has carried around his sacred shrine of her basically since the beginning, and, he always mentions her here and there, and so you always feel her presence within the story. He's always mentioning Roxy, but to actually have them meeting at last after so long, it's such a beautiful moment, honestly. And there's something I want to point out as well, is that this very sequence that happened was hinted at a very long time ago. This happened basically in Season 1, where Roxy talks to, I believe, Elena about, like, what her dream guy would be if she was to get with someone, and she basically foreshadows what actually happened in the dungeon, the teleportation labyrinth, that she wanted to find someone that would basically go into the depths to save her from a labyrinth, so to speak, and then, they would work together, and then they would fall in love with each other, so to speak. That is what she has been seeking, and then, obviously, this scene happened in today's episode. So, foreshadowing's there. It's pretty awesome. You love to see it when it offers. It kind of puts the pieces together to really hint at something that is potentially going to happen. Obviously, it's not going to be so easy for it to work out, because obviously Rudy is a married man now, so there's definitely going to be a lot more complications to what Roxy wants here, but that is still food for thought that the foreshadowing has been here since the very beginning. Now, there is something I want to talk about, okay? A nitty-gritty detail about this sequence that I feel like was lost in the adaptation of the anime, and it's not bad. Like, I want to clarify before I go any further that this episode legitimately, it handled this Roxy sequence so good. I'm not really upset about it in any way, but I do feel like there was one thing that was lost that I feel like anime-onlys should be aware of to really show the gravity of the situation, is that when this was in the light novel, okay, like when this was written in the light novel that I read a while back, there was a whole chapter dedicated to Roxy basically entering into the teleporter and randomly teleporting into the dungeon, and then she tried to find her way out. There was like 3 different paths or whatever of different teleportations, and she didn't want to necessarily go through one because it could be very dangerous, and she basically came to the realization that she was trapped in this dungeon, and she was just trying to hold out until someone potentially could find her. And basically, she was stuck here for an entire month within this dungeon, just relentlessly fighting non-stop day after day. And pretty much, the episode does let us know that, yes, she's been gone for a month, but it doesn't truly let us know just how much of a hell of an experience it was for Roxy being stuck in this dungeon. For instance, she, at one point in the light novel chapter of this happening, she encased herself basically into a hole. She was in a hole to where monsters really couldn't reach her, and she would drag in, like, the corpses of the monsters and stuff and eat their poisonous flesh just to be able to survive. And she was trying to save her magic because she couldn't really cast a lot of fire magic. I mean, the episode even clarifies that. Like, if fire was used a lot in this little space, it would basically cause carbon monoxide poisoning and you would just die. So she couldn't really use fire much to get rid of everything. And so she was most of the time eating just like raw monster meat just to survive for a full month. And you gotta imagine the effects that would do on your body, because you can't use fire because it would cause poison in the air. You have to, to survive and continuously fight just to not die for a full month, waiting for the inevitable if someone's going to be able to save you or not, and obviously being stuck in a very dark and dank labyrinth at that is just mysterious and old. You know, your hopes of survival just ticks down, and your chance of survival just goes close to zero every passing day. But on top of that, you know, if you're stuck in this dark labyrinth, you're going to just lose your sense of time. You're not going to know how long you're necessarily stuck in there. Like, you're surrounded by monsters, you can't see the sunlight or anything. You know, time will just start to stretch to where maybe what feels like what's normally an hour could feel like maybe 6 hours, because when you're constantly fighting and having to worry about survival, your just anxiety and mental focus is just so on edge that you're never going to have a moment where you're probably not thinking until you just pass out from exhaustion. And speaking of magic exhaustion, we know from the very early episodes of Mushoku Tensei, when someone, you know, gets, you know, exhausted, like when they use too much magic, they just straight up pass out. Look at what happened to Rudy throughout, you know, the first 2 episodes. So when you factor all this in, Roxy was always at the precipice of pushing herself to the point to where she would just pass out. And then obviously if she passed out in mid-fighting with monsters, she would just straight up die. And so this moment was very critical here, that what it was showing is that she pushed her magic to the point where when she did her enchantment to try to make an earth fortress to safeguard herself, magic didn't come out. Pretty much where she has nothing left. If she was to cast anything else, she's just gonna pass out. So it's just, the desperation here is just ridiculous. And I do love, like, how the episode conveyed this, but like I said, that month time that you didn't really get to see really just amplifies the misery and hell that Roxy was going through by herself for a very long time. Like, I want to reinstate exactly everything she went through. By herself for a full month, not knowing what a sense of time is, because time just is probably extending. You know, eating poisonous food, having to exert yourself magic-wise and physically and mentally constantly for every day for a full month. But on top of that, you know, sticking into a tight crevasse and not being able to move, and potentially just, you know, having to use the bathroom on your location, not showering, the stench and everything would just be so foul, not including the decaying corpses potentially of the creatures that's within the cave as well. There's just so much to really consider when it comes to just what she was dealing with. So it's just crazy. And so seeing this moment here with, you know, how it was foreshadowing to, like, her wanting to be saved and stuff, you like how this foreshadowing, you know, happened, but I don't think Roxy really appreciated, you know, probably having to go through the experience. But with that being said, though, I want to talk about the Paul and Rudy stuff, because I think that this is very important, because it kind of continues what was established in, like, episode 16, 17 of Season 1 of Mushoku Tensei, and I feel like it plays a huge part just showcasing the development that, you know, not just Rudy has experienced, but also Paul has experienced as well, and his group. It's just something that, you know, needs to be discussed, because I feel like that period in Mushoku Tensei for Season 1 was a very big turning point for the community that really, I think, amplified people's enjoyment of the story because of just how realistic and human their overall argument was and fallout as father and son. So Paul and Rudy, their relationship has always been complex, to say the least. We know that because of Rudy being technically reincarnated in this world, you know, he never fully viewed Paul and Zenith as his mother and father, because that's technically how some would view it. Like, if you were reincarnated and had your old memories of your previous life from, like, Japan or wherever, and, you know, you had now new parents in this new world, you probably wouldn't instantly, you know, think that they're your parents. You would probably think of your old parents and all that, and you wouldn't really call them mom or dad, like, seriously. You would just say that just because you have to, because you technically are their biological son in this world. Rudy had this very complex relationship, and especially with Paul of all people. And obviously Paul at an early age, when, you know, Rudy was young, you know, he wasn't able to be the father figure that he wanted to be, because Rudy was kind of already a grown adult. His mental mind was not like a kid of like a 5-year-old or 4-year-old. He was basically a grown adult mindset, obviously very childish and didn't have a really good view of the world, but he still was definitely more knowledgeable of things than how maybe a 5-year-old would be. And so you factor all this stuff in, Paul wasn't able to give life lessons or teach Rudy in a way that, you know, he would have wanted, because he didn't have many chances to be a father to him, which is one of the big reasons why Rudy and Paul had such a falling out in episodes 16 and 17, is because after a while, Paul started viewing his own son just like an adult, a very mature adult that was so intelligent, so well, like, smart and had so much wisdom that, Paul would never be able to compare to him. And Paul wasn't upset about that. He didn't feel, like, necessarily upset that he was inferior to his son. He just had such high expectations of his son because of how intelligent he was and how he just had a good grasp on the world, that he never thought that his son would actually act like a child sometimes. And so when that obviously happened in episode 16 and 17 and 18, we know the fallout that happened, and eventually their misunderstanding to talking it out and all that. It was a very beautiful moment, and it really is one of my favorite scenes of the entirety of the anime of Mushoku Tensei. And so seeing their rekindling of father and son relationship in this episode, how they have a little moment and all that, there's an understanding. Rudy mentions that he's sorry that he couldn't do more and try to find, like his mother Zenith, and then Paul doesn't try to blame him and all that, and then Paul's like, oh, you have a kid, you're married and all that. He gets very happy about basically being a grandpa. There's a lot of stuff that happens within the scene that just shows the maturity of both characters and how they finally have a good grasp on their relationship with each other. And that, Rudy really does see Paul as his father now, and obviously we know Paul's always seen Rudy as his son. It's just nice. And then this little exchange here while they're like going through the labyrinth and stuff, and you see like Paul trying to show off in front of Rudy. It's a very Paul-like thing to do, but a very father-like thing to do, wanting to make yourself look cool for your child. And just seeing that little scene, it's really cool. I love that. It's a very sweet and endearing scene. And then you have Elena Lisa's like, stop getting in front of me and all that. And the reason for this was to basically kind of rein in Paul from trying to show off, because even though Paul was trying to show off to Rudy, it could create bad habits. And she didn't want that as well, because obviously this is a very dangerous dungeon. Anything can happen. And, she wants to make sure Paul stays safe. So Elena Lee's obviously being someone that's more of a, like, trying to keep it straight-laced and not try to, do anything dangerous. I really respect that, from her character. But at the same time, seeing Paul show off, it's a very rare moment for him, and it kind of plays into his character why the argument happened in Season 1, is that Paul doesn't get to act like a father a lot to Rudy. And so in this moment, he really felt like he was getting to be a father figure showing off for his son. It's just a very cute and adorable moment, kind of showcasing the father and son relationship. But overall, the episode is really interesting. There's a lot of depth and detail to it. I mean, we have this whole little conversation with, like, Rudy and Paul talking about their doing the deed, so to speak, with the maid. It's just a wild moment, honestly, right in front of her at that. Just, yeah, there's so much here. I mean, I love Mushoku Tensei. Great episode, honestly. And, I mean, we even had this moment where the dwarf man, Talahan, I believe that's how you say his name, he was hitting on Rudy. He literally checked him out. We literally had a whole sequence for that. There's just so much, honestly, in this episode. And you gotta love how sometimes unshameless, or how shameless, Mushoku Tensei can be. But I think that's one of the big reasons why I can respect it as well. But, yeah, overall, that's the episode of Mushoku Tensei today. I just wanted to talk about it. If you enjoyed the episode, let me know. What was your favorite moment? Was it the Roxy scene? Was it the Paul and Rudy meetup? Just let me know in the comments below. But with that, be safe, stay healthy, and I love you guys. Chibi out.